Well, happy Friday, everyone. Josh is Severe Weather. Thank you for joining me here. We've got ourselves a potentially catastrophic situation for some here in the central and eastern part of the country, and probably a snow day for many of you starting back to school on Monday across the Ohio Valley and Mid-Atlantic states. Major storm system comes south and east. It picks up moisture. We're going to be talking about very heavy snow, an ice storm for some, and severe weather, including a few tornadoes across parts of the South. And this will be the beginning of what will be a very cold, wintry pattern over much of the country over the next few weeks. So we're going to talk about what's going on now first, and then we're going to take a look at what models show, and then we're going to take a look at the severe weather threat, the winter threat, and then the longer-term forecast in today's video. So thank you for joining me today. It's getting pretty cold out there across the upper Midwest. We're seeing temperatures this afternoon and evening below 10 degrees below zero Fahrenheit, all the way down below zero to the North Carolina or North Dakota, not North Carolina. I know I've been wishing for that, but no. North Dakota and South Dakota border, we're down in the single digits. Teens down into Iowa. We're seeing temperatures crashing across the Mid-Atlantic region, with some areas dealing with rain changing over to thunder snow in parts of the DC metro area here. So we're going to talk about that. But it's still warm down south. Temperatures in the 60s and 70s across Florida, the Gulf Coast region, mid to upper 70s in the desert Southwest. So the West Coast is not going to participate in this blast of winter, but it will be getting a lot colder as we get later to the weekend and next week for the central and eastern part of the country. The map is getting prettier with color, but that is not a good thing for those of you that need to travel this weekend. We have winter storm warnings in effect in pink across parts of Montana. A large chunk of the center of the country, the mid-Missouri Valley into the Ohio Valley, is under a winter storm warning or will be soon. This area in blue is a winter storm watch that will probably become a warning. And we also have winter storm warnings across the central Appalachians and across portions of Michigan. In the Southwest, things are relatively quiet, but we do have a fire danger over parts of New Mexico into this weekend. And not just in the center part of the country, but in the Northwest, when you get into the mountains and even on the plateaus here in parts of Montana, we're going to be dealing with winter conditions as well through the weekend. As we get later into this weekend, I do expect to see this portion of the country, mainly northern and central Virginia, the Delmarva, Maryland, central and eastern PA, and probably South Jersey, put under some sort of winter storm warning, or at least, very least, a winter weather advisory as this system continues to push east. Now, the storm itself has not moved on shore yet. It's getting close, heading towards the Oregon and Washington coastline, but it is expected to move down to the south and east following the base of a trough, which has brought chilly air across the eastern part of the country. It is going to move very quickly, but as the system enters the central part of the country, it's got lots of southwesterly flow that will send moisture up into the center part of the country. And so this system's got some legs to it. It's going to have a lot of moisture with it. It's going to put down heavy amounts of snow, ice, and rain, depending on how far north or how far south you are. Right now, the radar does show that rain moving into portions of northern Cal, into central and western Oregon and northwestern parts of Washington. We do have that snow falling across the interior of the Northwest. But it's fairly quiet in the central plains, just a light band of snow moving through places like Lincoln and St. Joseph, Missouri. And then we have some lake effect instability snow showers across much of the Great Lakes. Now, where things are getting dicey right now, and I've been watching this all afternoon, is in the Metro DC area and even farther east across southern Maryland, eastern Virginia, the Delmarva Peninsula, and Philadelphia. And in fact, pulling up radar scope, we do see earlier, we had snow squall warnings in effect over parts of the DMV here. Snow is falling in DC now. It's still raining over the Chesapeake Bay, but you can see this bright band here indicating heavy flakes that are mixing in across southern Maryland and moving through the Bay Area. And also into the northern neck of Virginia, we're probably going to see some snow falling as well. We did have snow squall warnings earlier over eastern Ohio. Now we see that across the PGH area, and even heading towards places like Altoona, Johnstown, PA, Du Bois, Pennsylvania, and eventually State College could see some of this snow as well. But not just snow, but just very low visibility being reported here with the MPING network in the Pittsburgh area, and also towards places like Evansburg or Greensburg, and eventually Evansburg. We'll see that as well. So rough conditions this afternoon and evening over western PA. We are seeing some low visibilities even down into the DC area. And we have seen reports of snowflakes sneaking into parts of the south on the south side of Richmond, Chesterfield County, as well as down around the Danville area, some snowflakes mixed in. Now, no accumulation this far south, but certainly things are turning more wintry as we head towards the weekend. This system's going to head out of here by the weekend. We will have some lake effect snow bands continuing into tomorrow morning. This is around noon tomorrow with the NAM model still showing a band of snow crossing the eastern part of Lake Superior, northern Lake Huron, Georgian Bay, all the way into places like Rome, New York, and just to the north of Binghamton and Ithaca. As we move on into Saturday night, this band does lift north, mainly on the Canadian side, and then we start to see our next system moving into the Central Plains here, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more here as we get into this video. But it's a colorful mess. The blue indicates moderate to heavy snow. The orange indicates heavy sleet. The pink indicates heavy freezing rain, and the green indicates rain falling here. And this is Sunday around lunchtime. Kansas City, we're talking about snow and the sleet line just to your south, sleet in Columbia and St. Louis, down into southwest Indiana and places like Fort Knox and maybe Louisville. Maybe some heavy ice farther south into the Ozarks region into western Kentucky Sunday afternoon. And you'll see a line of storms also is going to get fired up here as the afternoon wears on. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in this video. This system is going to be moving pretty quickly, but has a lot of mass to it. So when the snow starts, it could be snowing for up to 24 hours, maybe even a few places see more than that as we get into Sunday night into Monday. So a lot of folks are going to be picking up significant amounts of snow, probably the biggest snow for some of you in parts of Missouri and Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio since maybe a couple of years ago. And in the mid-Atlantic states, this could be the heaviest thumping of snow we've seen since that first day of work back in 2022, where everything got covered in snow very quickly and I-95 turned into a parking lot. Hopefully we're prepared this time. It's been in the forecast for a while, but Northern Virginia, Eastern West Virginia, Southern PA, Western and Central Maryland all have a good possibility of seeing significant plowable snow here Sunday night. And that will probably lead to school delays and closings for Monday. I would say probably across this area in here. Maybe not quite to New York State, but I would say south of I-80 is probably our best bet for that. We don't have school on Sunday, at least I don't hope we do, but we may have delays back in here just due to the fact that we're dealing with quite a bit of snow on the ground for the first day of work for some of you here for the new year. Now, here's a look at what the NAM is showing. Now, this is a little aggressive, but you'll see locally up to 12, maybe 24 inches of snow in upstate New York. I can zoom in to show that to you in just a second here. Even just to the east of places like south and east of Syracuse here, significant amounts of snow falling. But as we take this back here, looking at that bigger view, we can see while this is impressive, it is not the main storm. Here comes the main storm on Sunday morning, and that is going to bring a significant amount of snow into this area. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in the short term in just a little bit. So, storm system departing the East Coast. Next storm dives down very quickly all the way down into Oklahoma. This is going to bring a drastic temperature drop with it on Sunday in parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and eventually into the rest of the South for Sunday night. You'll see the green indicates where the rain is falling. This pink color in here indicates freezing rain. The purple is sleet, and the blue is snow. And the darker the color is, the more intense that is coming down. So this system on Sunday morning will be cranking up pretty quickly in eastern Colorado, southern Nebraska, western Oklahoma, and of course, most of Kansas is going to be a mess here, except maybe the far southeastern part of it. The low is actually going to get pushed a little more to the south, meaning that the heaviest snow will actually occur later in the day as that cold air wraps in behind it. You see this big region of high pressure. This is sending that cold air down from western Canada and from the polar regions. And what it's going to do is crank up the wind. And I do expect at some point in here, we may see blizzard conditions over this portion of Kansas, northern Oklahoma, maybe all the way to Kansas City. That would be during the day Sunday and especially Sunday afternoon. As the storm moves farther to the east, the winds will relax some, but it will still be pretty windy, and that will cause problems clearing that snow up on Monday morning in central Illinois and in eastern Missouri. In fact, it could be snowing pretty hard in St. Louis still. Looking farther south, we see yellows and reds indicating heavier storms, which will be moving through Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee. And some of that will have severe weather and certainly some flood potential with it as well. Now, the cold air doesn't get as far south as what it looked like it might do a few days ago. So in North Carolina, In East Tennessee, this is primarily going to be rain for you. Now, it may start out briefly as some freezing rain over parts of northeast Tennessee and certainly in southern Kentucky, but overall, the track of this storm is a little bit to your north, so it will start out as a wintry mix and then switch over to rain here Sunday afternoon and Sunday night. So a brief wintry mix going over to rainfall here by Sunday evening in East Tennessee and probably southeast Kentucky. And we even see that rain coming as far north and east as places like maybe Bridgeport and Clarksburg in West Virginia Monday morning. Now, this will primarily be snow for the Mason-Dixon line, but it will be a sloppy, icy mix over southern Illinois, southern Indiana, southern Ohio, northern West Virginia, the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, and for much of northern Virginia, all the way into the Bay region here. North of the Mason-Dixon line, I think this is going to stay snow for those of you in the Philadelphia area, in Harrisburg and Lancaster, Pennsylvania, into central and south Jersey. Now, interestingly, as this storm leaves the coast, it will go over the Gulf Stream, it will strengthen, and the upper level feature is going to be lagging behind it. So we could see a switch over to some thumping of snow here Monday night and early Tuesday morning across Virginia, maybe even northeastern North Carolina and the rest of the Delmarva. And depending on how quickly this moves out, we may have school delays or even some closings early on Tuesday across this area. And I'm most concerned with eastern Virginia and the Delmarva Peninsula if this slows down any bit. You will see that the cold air does come in behind this system. We're going to talk about the long range in a little bit, but this is not really a big storm for New England or upstate New York. This is going to be southern PA, maybe central PA, mid-Atlantic region, Ohio Valley, and certainly the Missouri Valley and Central Plains is going to get crushed here. Now, here's the European model, and it doesn't look a whole lot different. We do see some agreement here. There are some minor differences. Like, for example, St. Louis is a little bit colder on the Euros, so we see less ice and more snow versus the GFS, which brings that warm layer aloft and allows what falls to refreeze before it hits the ground. And that would be during the day on Sunday. But you will see this has quite a bit more snow falling over parts of the mountains of West Virginia, Western Virginia, and Western Maryland. And then you also see the snow on the backside gets all the way down to places like Nashville and Chattanooga on Monday morning. There could even be thunderstorms in the Carolinas down to Georgia and North Florida here Monday morning. So maybe not Raleigh, but down towards Lumberton and Marion County and Florence, maybe dealing with thunderstorms. When you go up I-95 towards the Virginia border, we might be talking about some ice still in the morning. So that's how dynamic the storm is as the warm air comes up temporarily before it gets colder. Now, during the day on Monday, we will see this snow may continue for many of us here in the mid-Atlantic while it dries out farther north of the Mason-Dixon line. But the European still has some snow all the way down close to Raleigh and Durham and Greensboro late in the day on Monday. Does it stick to the grass? If it comes down hard enough, that's certainly a possibility, but no guarantee of that at this point. The storm's going to exit. It's going to be a cold and windy day on Tuesday, and then I'm going to get to the long range in just a little bit. Here's another view of the NAM model across the plains. Precipitation starts early in the day tomorrow over Kansas. It'll start out icy. It's just going to get worse as the day wears on. Places like Wichita and Hutchinson, Kansas. We see heavy snow over northern parts of Kansas, and whatever's icing up during the evening hours goes over to snow on top of that ice for Sunday morning. So big time snow could even come down in places like Enid, Oklahoma, eventually Kansas City, and then we see that switch back around St. Louis here towards the evening hours. So the NAM is a little bit farther north, kind of like that GFS model is with that layer of ice versus the European, which has more snow and less ice across the I-70 corridor, kind of right in here is what we're looking at. Maybe not all the way down here, but maybe this portion here. Sorry, my pen's a little thick there. But you can see central Indiana, this is pretty much heavy snow, especially north of Indianapolis. This could be a real big thumping for you there. Columbus, Ohio. I know some of you in Ohio have been screaming for snow. Well, this is your storm, it looks like. Farther to the east here. Now, the NAM doesn't, the 12K doesn't go out past 60 hours, so I'm going to show you, or the 3K doesn't, so I'm going to show you the 12K. But this is midnight on Monday morning, Sunday night, and snowing hard in parts of central Ohio, icing hard in southern Ohio, and major ice potentially over the Ohio River Valley, especially south across parts of Kentucky and West Virginia. This could be a really nasty setup for you here. Meanwhile, North Carolina, we may see a brief amount of freezing rain, but it's probably liquid for the most part here, except maybe in the foothills to the west of the higher Piedmont area. Monday morning. That would be brief. And then you can see a line of rain and maybe thunderstorms moves through the southeast, mainly north of you in Florida. Then you see the change back to snow all the way into middle Tennessee Monday morning. Heavy snow, basically north of I-70 here across Maryland and from Dover on northward. Really heavy snow potentially in South Jersey here. Atlantic City even could see quite a bit of snow. So the Atlantic Ocean has kind of been our enemy for winter storms over the last couple of winters. This system has some legs to it. It's going to be a fight, but the models are all pretty much keying in on a significant snowfall for those of you in South Jersey and in the Delaware Valley and in eastern Maryland. And NAM still has it coming down pretty good here as late as 1 in the morning on Tuesday, maybe even all the way up to Tuesday morning on the eastern shore of Virginia and Maryland and across the Delmarva Peninsula. So that's what we're tracking for you here. Here's a look at snow totals. Now, this is the Kashera ratio, probably a bit high, but you get the picture here. This is really going to dump a lot of snow, maybe up to 2 feet over parts of central Kansas, 1.5 feet over northern Missouri, at least a foot in parts of central Illinois and Indiana, and all the way towards places like Dayton and Wilmington, maybe even Columbus, and southern PA, northeastern West Virginia, western Maryland will get crushed here as well, with locally up to 18 inches of snow. I'm curious to see if these numbers are going to end up being too high, but that's kind of the high-end limit of how this could be. Now, the GFS model is not a lot different. You can see it's got quite a bit coming down. Cincinnati, 15 inches. St. Louis, about a foot. KC, 16 inches. And you get to D.C., and it's showing 10 inches of snow coming down. That might be a little bit high, but that is pretty significant here. Here's the European model, same region. You can see there is a break in the European where, yes, it's coming down hard in Kansas, southern Nebraska, northern Missouri, but a little less in parts of central and southern Illinois and Indiana. This is not as impressive here. It kind of splits into 2 pieces. So you got one that just drops heavy, heavy snow over the Central Plains and the lower Missouri Valley. Then you get a break in the lower Ohio Valley. It's not that it's not snowing, but there's some mixing issues going on, and there's just a transfer of energy from the cold coming down, the cold conveyor belt, and the milder air coming up from the southeast. And then things come down again once we get over into the mid-Ohio Valley and farther east of the Appalachians. So that is a look at this part of the country. I do want to show you sleet. This is something we definitely don't want to ignore, especially in central Missouri. Maybe a couple of inches of sleet. 4 inches of sleet in St. Louis would be really bad, but that will cut your snow totals down slightly as well. But even across Kentucky into parts of Virginia here, we could be talking about some sleet, maybe even a couple of inches in places like Harrisonburg and Stanton, Virginia, maybe even over into places like Orange County and getting close to D.C., Prince William County, those areas in there. And then ice, freezing rain. Not that sleet is not a problem, but freezing rain is especially a problem. And we could see over 1 inch of glaze along the Ohio River here and across the Ozarks. This could be a pretty crushing ice storm for those areas. Could be pretty bad in southwestern Virginia and in places like Hot Springs and in Lewisburg, West Virginia, maybe Beckley as well. This could be a significant ice event. Here's a closer look at what's going to come down in just 24 hours. And you can see where the GFS has that heaviest snow. So it's more in the European here. Taking this off to the mid-Atlantic area so you can see. And actually, I jumped over the Shenandoah area. So let me get back to the, let's see if I can find it for you. Southern apps here. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Whoops, and we got to go back to 12Z. We're not ready for the 18Z just yet. But here you can see here, northern Kentucky gets crushed. Central Kentucky, it's going to be a lot of mixing. On the backside, though, we do look at a little bit of snow falling all the way into western North Carolina. Maybe even northern Alabama and northern Georgia do get a chance at picking up a little bit of snow. Finally, let's take you to the mid-Atlantic. And you can see right over northern Maryland and southern PA and South Jersey, northern Delaware is where things could come down hard. And this can shift both directions. So if you're in D.C. and it's showing you 9 inches, but in Bethesda it's showing you a foot, 13 in Baltimore, those could be half that much, or they could come up beyond a foot. Which would more than make up for the last couple of winters. So something we're watching for you. New York City, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Allentown, you'll see a little bit here, but it could shift to your south and you could end up kind of getting gypped on this system. Let's take a look at the wind. And this is going to be a problem for those of us in the high plains here. And also a problem as it's snowing that we're going to be dealing with 35-mile-an-hour wind gusts on Sunday across Kansas, Nebraska, maybe 40. So The visibility could be low enough for us to even see this upgraded to blizzard warnings, maybe in this area, maybe even down into this area. So do be preparing for that. It's going to make for some very dangerous travel. We're also going to have strong winds ahead of our cold front down south where gusts could get over 50 miles per hour. Look at these apparent temperatures. That's the wind chill versus the heat index, which we don't have to talk about at this point. Take a look at Sunday. We're going to see 60s in Dallas-Fort Worth in the morning, going over to the 20s in northwest Texas and teens in northwestern Oklahoma by lunchtime on Sunday. Look at this drop coming. We start the day feeling like we're in the low 60s in Dallas. We end the day feeling like we're in the upper teens. Single digits and below here where that snowpack is. Just a brutal amount of cold coming down. This is definitely a norther here across the southern plains. Now let's talk about severe weather. We do have that threat in particular across the south central states. And probably not so much Saturday, but Sunday is when things could get rough. And I would not be shocked if we saw a bit of an upgrade across the Delta region here. We saw a lot of tornadoes last weekend, and unfortunately, 8 days later, we are going to see the same area under the gun here for some tornadoes and damaging wind. If you look at this model forecast radar, you'll see Sunday is not super bad. It's cloudy and moist, but that's about it. Sunday morning, we start to see a line of storms building towards lunchtime in East Texas. And then as we move this into the afternoon hours, this is about 2 p.m., 3 p.m., things picking up in Louisiana and eastern Arkansas and then moving into Mississippi. There could be a few embedded tornadoes. By the time this gets into Alabama later at night, there's still going to be a risk towards the Mississippi border, but I think this will be a quieter setup than what we saw last week. Take a look at our tornado parameters here. They're not zero, but they're not as high. East Texas, things start getting a little busier late in the day here, right along that border with Louisiana. And northern Louisiana, central Louisiana, places like Alexandria, Natchitoches, maybe Ruston and Monroe need to be watching this, but it will fade by nighttime. It's not that there's no risk by then, but it will be a much lesser risk. Looking at the longer term, you can see the Arctic oscillation stays negative for a couple of weeks here until we get to about the middle of the month of January, which means it stays pretty cold. The EPO is a little bit positive, meaning we still have Pacific moisture coming across, and then that moisture drops off somewhat, but the control run is a lot different than the ensemble. The ensemble shows that we still will have Pacific air in play here. So if it's cold enough, the storm pattern is going to stay active. The NAO stays negative. This means warm in Greenland, cold in the eastern United States. We've got the block setting up where the cold air can't leave. It does go closer to positive or at least neutral here towards the 17th or 18th. And during this timeline, when things are climbing, is when we often can see an East Coast storm. That doesn't mean it absolutely is going to happen, but closer to Martin Luther King Day or right before is when we have to watch that. And the PNA stays positive, meaning the South could certainly see cold and maybe wintry weather. And until it goes negative, we still have that possibility, but we don't have anything definite at this point. And if you look at the ensemble, you see the cold, it just keeps reloading. And what's going to be interesting here next week is this piece of energy down in here. Because what happens is you got cold air that gets fed back in from the northeast, you have ridging in the west, and that forces storms to come down pretty far south. And if they keep going south, we're going to miss out on something in the southeast, and it's just going to be a Gulf Coast or Texas type setup here for Thursday and Friday of next week. But that could still change. Beyond that, beyond next week, it's still cold in the east, but we are going to start to moderate some, maybe not until about the 20th or so of January. Here's a look at temperatures over the next couple of days, and you can see we are going to have warm weather across Texas, Arizona, and the Southwest. Pretty warm Sunday ahead of our storm system, but take a look at Monday. We go from the 70s to the 30s and 40s in Louisiana and Arkansas, teens in Nebraska here, and teens in Illinois on Tuesday. These are highs, even colder on Wednesday and even on Thursday. Here's a look at low temperatures. This is where it gets really cold here. We're looking at mild temperatures Sunday morning, some record high minimums, but then we wipe that out with much colder temperatures below freezing down to Interstate 10 on Monday morning, even colder Tuesday into Wednesday before temperatures will start to recover. I do want to show you the eastern United States. Highs tomorrow will be chillier in the northeast, a little bit warmer Sunday, and then as our storm approaches, you can see that warm air does push up into the Carolinas, so 50s and 60s, no storm threat in Raleigh other than maybe a few thunderstorms, but much colder north of the border, mid-30s in Richmond, low 30s on the I-95 corridor, 20s across New England for Monday. Behind the storm Tuesday, it gets even colder. even down to the mid-50s on the I-4 corridor in Central Florida. Wednesday, still pretty chilly, and maybe another shot of cold coming on Thursday. Here's a look at our low temperatures real quick here. I'll try to wrap this up because I know we're going a bit long today, but below zero in northern New England for Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday, here comes the cold from the plains. And where the snow's on the ground, we should be well below zero in parts of northern Missouri, central Illinois, southern and central Indiana, maybe into Ohio, and maybe parts of West Virginia. And Thursday morning, Friday morning in the mountains of North Carolina, I know we've got a lot of folks still dealing with the cleanup from Helene. We could have temperatures down below 0 degrees in the higher elevations. Here's a look at snow probability here beyond. And you will see after the storm leaves, the chances aren't as great in the southeast later next week. They're actually better across Texas. But eventually on Friday and Saturday, we've got to keep an eye on something that may try to move out into the Tennessee Valley and eventually get into the Carolinas. This is not very impressive, not from what we saw a few days ago, but there is still a possibility here of something. And then that pattern tries to repeat itself towards the middle of the following week, but not necessarily a very favorable one. If you do look at the GFS model here, and I'll go back to the 12Z, you will see that this system here in the southwest by the middle of next week will move out into colder air, and there will be snow potential in parts of Texas and Oklahoma, and we have to watch Louisiana, Mississippi, maybe even all the way up to the Ohio River here. We have to see if this phases with the trough. Probably just going to be rain on the Gulf Coast. I know models a few days ago showed it much colder, but we could have wintry weather in Tennessee and the Carolinas, maybe North Georgia here. We may have ice, not just snow. And then that moves out over next weekend, and then we continue to watch waves of cold come down. So it's not looking great, promising, but this could certainly change quite a bit. The European model is not as impressive with the cold. It's slower with our system. The cold starts to leave and moves out. Our polar vortex retreats, and as a result, whatever is snowing goes over to rain on the Gulf Coast and maybe some heavy rain. We do get snow maybe in the mid-Atlantic, but again, these models are loving to flip and flop here, unfortunately, so just not a great signal just yet. But if you're in Texas, this is looking pretty significant here for Friday, maybe around Dallas and Austin and Waco, maybe even San Antonio, maybe even closer to Houston. And then our chances dwindle as we get to next weekend. So that's all I've got for you. I know that was a long video, lots to talk about. I'm going to try to be back on here tomorrow. But I do thank you for your time. I'm praying for everybody's safety with this storm. I am a Christian. I give all the honor and glory to God who gives me this gift as a meteorologist. And to give us a spirit, just give us a spirit and love from God. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-control." And I think the most important of that is love. If we love others the way God loves us, then this planet's going to be a lot better place to live. But if we continue to try to do everything ourselves and not give God all the glory, there's going to be a lot more evil out there. And I just want to try to be a light to everybody in this dark time. My thoughts and prayers were people who have been impacted by the recent attacks. And I just pray for everybody's safety here this weekend. I'll catch up with you all tomorrow. Have a blessed night.